She had committed a crime, punishable by death, and everyone wanted to make her suffer. Everyone, that is, except the healer from Nazareth. KBC Dramatics presents The Woman Who Sinned.
Greetings, everyone. It is time again for you to put your feet up, relax, and enjoy the next 20 minutes so that we can look into history. My guests today are Flavius, the decorated Roman soldier, Elon, a Levi priest, and Leah, an Israeli woman. The moment in history we are looking at today is the famous woman accused of adultery. Now, tell me, Flavius, how did you get involved in this bizarre incident?
Well, you see, I was on patrol duty and I thought I had to investigate when I heard the shouting and screaming from a crowd assembled outside a house in Jerusalem. Being a centurion of the Roman army, I knew these sudden gatherings could be a match about to start a fire. These Palestinians hated our presence and would use any excuse to start a revolt.
So, what did you actually find out?
Well, when I got there, all I saw was a number of priests, followed by 20 citizens standing around a young woman laying in the road. The one priest was ranting and raving about an evil debauchery she was. Upon inquiry, I was informed that this woman had committed the most horrendous sin and was about to be stoned to death. I did not say anything, despite the fact that only the governor could sanction such executions. If they wanted to kill each other, well, let it be. I could not quite understand it, but they were delaying the carrying out of their execution and seemed to be waiting for someone. I remember staring down at the woman. She looked so tiny and helpless as she cowered in the gutter. Terror and desperation personified. We Roman soldiers were taught to never feel empathy, but I could not help feel a tinge in my heart as I looked at her. Then, the reason for the delay came around the corner. It was that healer from Nazareth, followed by quite a few supporters. I could see a smile crease the face of the leader of these priests. He grabbed the arm of the petrified woman and dragged her over the hard ground in the middle of the street. I thought this was the end for her, as I saw the men picking up the largest rocks they could find.
Rocks? Now, what did they want with rocks?
Well, to stone her, of course.
Oh.
What happened then, I still cannot explain. This Jesus bent down and started doodling in the sand. He turned and said something to the men in Hebrew. Slowly, one by one, these macho priests dropped the stones there and wandered off. Jesus helped the woman up, and with tears streaming, she kissed his hand before disappearing into one of the houses. I had never seen anything like it. Usually what these priests said, the Hebrews did, without any question. Anyway, I was happy because I did not have to write a detailed report to the prefect about another death in the city.
Well, interesting, Flavius. Very interesting and rather intriguing. Now, our next guest is Elon the priest, who was, shall we say, the main whistleblower of this whole escapade. Greetings, Elon. Now, what did you personally make of this renowned incident that happened in your corner of the woods? Well, it was fascinating and so exciting. It was as if Yahweh was firmly on our side. I mean, everything was falling into place. A few citizens from houses near the Damascus Gate area of Jerusalem came to me and said that a young woman was committing adultery by living with a man who was not legally her husband. They said it was making the neighborhood look bad. I was contemplating what to do when one of my Pharisees came to see me and said that this Jesus of Nazareth was on his way from the Mount of Olives and would soon be entering the city through the Damascus Gate. My mind began working overtime as I pictured killing two birds with one stone. This love-preaching crowd pleaser will never get out of this, I thought, as I began hatching my plan. Besides, Caiaphas will be awfully pleased when I've made Jesus look bad. And I also heard that he was actually looking for an assistant. I gathered a few hardy priests and some laybys who were doing nothing, and told them we were going to eradicate the city from filth, and together we marched to this house of sin. I burst open the door, strode in, grabbed the woman, and dragged her into the street. I have been studying the Torah for over 20 years and knew by heart every Moses' law. Yahweh hates adultery and sentences the woman who committed it to death by stoning, which, through clenched teeth, I expounded to the woman lying in the dirt. And by this time, a large crowd had gathered. This was getting better and better by the minute, I thought. The more witnesses for his embarrassment, the better. It was not long before I heard the crowd coming from the gate. I just knew it was him with his troop of hangers-on. A short time later, he was standing next to the woman as she lay sobbing. "This woman was taken in adultery," I shouted across the street to him. "And as I'm sure you are aware from the Torah, God, through Moses, said that such woman must be stoned to death. We are ready to carry out God's will. What do you say, O Master?" What upset me more than anything was that he never answered. He was incredibly rude and impolite by crouching down next to the woman and writing in the sand. Can you believe it? I asked him again, but he said nothing. I was now totally frustrated, and just about to instruct the men to begin throw the stones that they were already clutching, when he looked up and, staring straight at me, played a really cheap trick by saying that he who is without sin throw the first stone, playing on the people's conscience. Even I could not throw that especially large rock I had picked up. One by one we left. Oh, anyway, I had better things to do. I heard that the woman is reformed and went back to her husband. But as for Jesus, well, we did not have to worry about him anymore. Caiaphas had managed to get him crucified. And no one will ever hear of this blasphemer again. Oh, but Elon, He is followed by millions. Only the brainwashed Gentiles. well, I see. Ah, well, our next guest is none other than Leah, the woman who actually was apprehended by Elon. Welcome, Leah. So, what do you actually remember about that remarkable incident?
Oh, I will never forget that day, that mind blowing day when they burst open the door and marched into the house. The main priest, Elon, screamed at me that I was an evil slut and committing adultery. He never gave me a chance to explain, but grabbed me by my hair and dragged me into the street. He quoted from some or other law in the scriptures that women committing adultery must be stoned. He said that, as everyone knew, I was living in sin with the man that was not my husband. I was terrified as I lay in the dust watching the men collecting the biggest stones they could find, waiting, just waiting to die.
Oh, it must have been terrifying.
And all I could do was close my eyes and wait for the first stone to crush into my head. It was then when I heard a commotion and looked up. Through red soaked eyes, I saw him. The priest strode over to this prophet and stated that I was guilty of adultery, and according to the law of Moses, I must be stoned to death. I caught a glimpse of the smile on his face as he ironically asked if Jesus agreed with this. I heard of this preacher a few times and knew that everything he taught was in accordance with the Word of God. I bowed my head, expecting him to agree with the priest, but he said nothing. All he did was crouch next to me. I did not know where to look. I felt his eyes burning into my soul. They pestered him, but he still said nothing. He leant forward and began writing in the sand. I can still remember some of those words he wrote that have branded themselves into my brain. Hypocrite? Liar? Cheat? He looked up and stared at each one in turn before saying, "The one among you who has no sin, let him cast the first stone." I waited in trepidation, my head bowed and eyes closed before hearing the stones drop one by one. I eventually built up enough courage to look up. They were all gone. Only the master and I remained. He grabbed my hand and gently helped me stand up. "Where are those that condemn you?" he asked as he stared at me with the kindest eyes I have ever seen. "There is no one here, Lord," I replied in a stammering voice. He calmly took my hands in his and said, "Well, my girl, neither do I condemn you. Now go and sin no more." At that moment, it felt as if a bucket of fresh water had been poured into my soul and flowing into every nook and cranny. I had never felt so clean, so invigorated. He had forgiven every sin I had ever committed and given me a new life. I was never going to be the same again.
Ooh, wow. Now, what a touching and gripping story. One thing stands out. One thing that seems to make life worthwhile. forgiveness. Total and complete forgiveness. This is Mike Todd from Looking into History, saying, remember the past so we can make the future better. Till we meet again.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear. In grace, my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear.